Yo, listen, before social media, before internet outrage, before people were screaming at each other on timelines 24 hours a day, there was one television show that could start arguments in American homes so intense people literally stopped talking during dinner. And now for real, I am not exaggerating. Families would sit down to watch All in the Family together, and by the time the credits rolled, parents and kids were debating politics, race, war, feminism, religion, and the future of America itself. This was not just entertainment. This was cultural warfare happening in real time inside ordinary living rooms. And that right there is why I truly believe All in the Family might be the most important sitcom ever created. Not just funny, not just groundbreaking, important. Because this show forced millions of Americans to confront opinions and tensions they were already carrying inside themselves. It exposed the generational divide of the 1970s so honestly that people watching at home often saw their own family reflected back at them on screen. Welcome back, everybody. Today we are diving deep into how All in the Family divided living rooms across America and completely transformed television forever. And trust me, once you understand what this show was doing back then, you start realizing modern television still has not fully matched its courage. Now let us set the stage for a second because context matters. The show premiered in January 1971 on CBS during one of the most divided periods in modern American history. The Vietnam War was tearing the country apart. Civil rights protests had transformed the national conversation. Women liberation movements were challenging traditional gender roles. Young people distrusted government authority after years of political scandal and violence. America felt tense everywhere. And then suddenly here comes this sitcom, centered around a loud, opinionated, conservative working-class man from Queens named Archie Bunker. Oh, man! Created one of the most complicated characters television had ever seen. Archie was racist sometimes, sexist sometimes, narrow-minded constantly, loud all the time, yet somehow deeply human underneath all that anger and fear. That contradiction is exactly what made the show explosive. Because here is the thing people still argue about decades later. Were audiences supposed to laugh at Archie or with him? Think about that. That question alone divided America. Some viewers saw Archie as a satire of ignorance. Others saw him as the only person brave enough to say what they believed privately. And trust me, the genius of Norman Lear was that he never fully resolved that tension. The show lived inside ambiguity. That made people uncomfortable, real uncomfortable. And yo, this is my first huge hot take. Modern television explains itself too much. All in the Family trusted viewers to wrestle with contradiction. It did not pause every 5 minutes to announce the official moral lesson. The show let people argue. Sometimes it even wanted people angry. Now picture the setup inside the Bunker household at 704th Street in Queens, New York. Archie sitting in his chair complaining about liberals, immigrants, taxes, changing values, and basically the entire modern world. Then across from him sits Michael, played brilliantly by Rob, the liberal college student son-in-law Archie constantly calls meathead. Their arguments became legendary because millions of families were having those exact same arguments at home. You had fathers watching saying Archie is right about everything. You had younger viewers screaming, no, he is not. And you know what made it even crazier? Sometimes Archie actually made good points. Not always, but sometimes. That complexity drove audiences insane because people wanted television heroes and villains. All in the Family gave them flawed human beings instead. And let me tell you something fascinating. Before the show aired, CBS executives were terrified, absolutely terrified. The network even included warnings before episodes explaining the program used humor to expose prejudice and social conflict. Think about that. A sitcom needed disclaimers because executives feared the audience reaction. And honestly, they had reason to worry. Religious groups protested the show. Conservative groups protested the show. Liberal groups protested too because some believed Archie was portrayed too sympathetically. Everybody felt attacked somehow. That is how powerful this series was. Now let us talk about one of the most important reasons the show divided living rooms so intensely. It brought national politics directly into personal family space. That changed everything. Before All in the Family, most sitcom families existed in fantasy worlds where nobody discussed real social conflict. Families worried about harmless misunderstandings or goofy neighborhood problems. Then suddenly Archie Bunker is arguing about race relations during dinner while Michael fights back about war and equality. The conversations felt frighteningly real. And trust me, sometimes they became painfully real. Take the Draft Dodger Christmas episode. Oh man, the visual contrast alone is genius. Christmas decorations glowing warmly while political tension explodes across the dinner table. Archie defending patriotism and military service while younger characters question the Vietnam War and American leadership. Families watching at home saw their own holiday arguments reflected back at them. That is why people reacted so emotionally to this series. It was not abstract, it was personal. Another massive dividing point came from how the show handled race. Archie constantly made ignorant comments and stereotypes, yet the show also exposed the fears and insecurities underneath those attitudes. Some viewers believed the show condemned racism brilliantly. Others thought it normalized offensive language by making audiences laugh. And here comes another hot take. I think the discomfort was the point. Norman Lear understood something very important. Comedy lowers defenses. When people laugh, they become more open emotionally. All in the Family used that opening to force audiences into difficult conversations they might otherwise avoid. Look at the legendary Sammy Davis Jr. episode. Sammy Davis guest stars, and the entire episode builds toward that iconic moment where Sammy kisses Archie on the cheek before a photograph. The audience exploded because the scene challenged racial assumptions through humor instead of lectures. And what makes the moment unforgettable is Archie's expression afterward. Completely stunned, frozen in confusion. It became one of the most famous images in television history because it captured the entire emotional contradiction of the show in one shot. Now compare that to modern television where controversial moments are often carefully designed to avoid ambiguity. All in the Family thrived on ambiguity. That was its power. And we gotta talk about Bunker too, because this is what people often overlook. Gene quietly delivered one of the greatest performances in sitcom history. Seemed naive and soft on the surface, but emotionally she held the family together. Her kindness balanced Archie's anger. Her compassion softened the tension, and sometimes unexpectedly became the moral center of the entire series. One reason audiences connected so deeply with the show is because every family member represented a different version of America. Archie represented traditional working-class conservatism. Michael represented younger liberal activism. Gloria represented women caught between generations, represented emotional empathy in a divided household. The show basically turned one queen's living room into a miniature version of America itself. And now for real, that is genius writing. Another reason the series divided households is because it aired during a time when television still felt communal. Families watched together. Millions of people experienced episodes simultaneously. There was no streaming, no personal phones, no watching alone in your bedroom. If All in the Family aired Sunday night, the entire country reacted together. Can you imagine that today? One episode could dominate national conversation for an entire week. That is exactly what happened with controversial episodes involving sexual assault, homosexuality, menopause, religion, and political corruption. People debated these episodes at work, at school, at church, and especially at home. And here is another opinion that might upset some people. I honestly think television became safer after All in the Family because networks realized how dangerous truly honest comedy could become. Sure, later shows pushed boundaries too, explored working-class family struggles. South Park attacked political correctness and media hypocrisy. Blackish tackled race and identity in modern America. But All in the Family walked into unexplored territory first. And unlike many modern shows, it did not feel designed by committee. It felt alive, risky, unpredictable. Sometimes uncomfortable silence lasted longer than expected. Sometimes audience laughter sounded nervous. Sometimes arguments ended without easy resolution. That realism made the experience emotionally intense. And let us give respect to the live audience too, because their reactions became part of the show itself. You can hear moments where people are unsure whether to laugh. That tension created incredible energy. There is also something fascinating about how different generations interpreted the series. Older viewers often sympathized with Archie because they recognized the economic fears and cultural confusion underneath his anger. Younger viewers identified with Michael challenging outdated beliefs. Couples argued about who was right. The show did not simply divide liberals and conservatives. It divided parents and children, husbands and wives, friends and... That is cultural impact on another level. And trust me, the spin-offs prove how massive the influence became. Tackled feminism and abortion. The explored Black upward mobility and interracial tensions. Good Times examined poverty and systemic inequality. Norman Lear basically transformed sitcoms into social commentary machines. Now here comes maybe my biggest hot take of the whole video. I think people miss All in the Family because it treated audiences like adults. It assumed viewers could handle discomfort. It assumed people could hear opinions they hated without collapsing emotionally. Modern entertainment often feels terrified of genuine conflict. But conflict is exactly what made this show unforgettable. And the craziest part is how relevant the series still feels. Watch those arguments today and you realize America is still fighting about the same issues. Race, immigration, economic anxiety, political identity, media distrust, generational frustration. The hairstyles changed. The technology changed, but the emotional tension is still here. That is why the show continues to matter decades later. Do you remember watching All in the Family with your family? Did arguments break out in your house too? And tell me honestly, do you think a show this fearless could survive on network television today? Because I genuinely do not know. Part of me thinks audiences are still capable of handling complicated comedy. But another part of me thinks corporations and social media culture would panic immediately. All in the Family survived because it existed before every controversial moment became an instant online war. At the end of the day, this show divided living rooms across America because it reflected America honestly. It showed people arguing about the future while still trying to remain a family. And maybe that is the real genius of the series. Beneath all the shouting and politics and controversy, the bunkers still loved each other. Messily, imperfectly, loudly. Just like real families. Drop a like if you think All in the Family is one of the greatest television shows ever created. Subscribe for more deep dives into legendary television history. Share this video with somebody who loves classic sitcoms. And hit that notification bell because we are gonna keep exploring the shows that changed American culture forever.